It's Paul Joseph Watson with Infowars.com. What you're not being told about the beheading of James Foley. First, a disclaimer or an advisory. This video does not contain footage of the beheading of James Foley. And I say that firstly because I don't want my YouTube account shut down. And secondly, because the UK police, Scotland Yard, came out yesterday with a chilling statement in which they said merely watching the video of the beheading of James Foley may be an act of terrorism. That's right, not only disseminating the video, i.e. sharing a link on Facebook, but the mere act of watching the video has been described by the police in the United Kingdom as a possible terrorist offence. This is from the Financial Times' David Alan Green. A quote from the MPS Counter-Terrorism Command: "We would like to remind the public that viewing, downloading or disseminating extremist material within the UK may constitute an offence under terrorism legislation." Viewing the video may constitute an offence under terrorism legislation according to British police. Green asked the police under what law mere viewing of the video constituted a possible terrorist offence. The police could not provide the law. So, full disclosure, I have watched the video of the beheading of James Foley. Now, if in the eyes of Scotland Yard and the British police, that makes me a terrorist for investigating this video as a journalist from a media perspective, then it also makes people working within Scotland Yard who watched the video as part of their investigation also terrorists. And as I highlighted in my article today, if watching a YouTube or a live leak video can be classified itself as a terrorist act, then what's next? We know the DHS has characterized liberty-loving Americans, libertarians, conservatives, as extremists in the same category as militant Islamists. So, are we going to see mundane libertarian philosophical videos be classified as extremist material in the future, where governments will use that to claim that anybody who watches them, watches this extremism, this anti-government extremism, is engaging in an act of terrorism? It's absolutely chilling as it applies to the free flow of information on the internet. And of course, anyone with an ounce of rationality or logical thinking will know the history of war provocation, the history of propaganda about Iraqi babies being thrown out of incubators, faked so-called chemical weapons attack in Syria last year, blamed on the Assad government in an attempt to create the pretext for a war. Of course, later the MIT report came out and said that the chemical weapons attack could not have been fired from a government area. So there are numerous examples of governments staging incidents, staging provocations, casus bellis, to create the justification, the pretext for war. Now we have ISIS, which of course is a completely brutal organization. If all of them could be wiped off the face of the earth today, I would vehemently support it. But now they're threatening to behead another American, and it's turned out to be the perfect poster child for US military expansion in the Middle East. And of course, this propaganda partly rests on the public not knowing the truth about ISIS, which is the fact that from its very inception, it was funded by the United States' biggest allies. It was armed, it was bankrolled by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Turkey, and Qatar. You will not see that fact mentioned amidst this greasing the skids for military expansion in the Middle East as a result of the ISIS threat. The group itself was created with money and arms from the US's closest allies in the region. And then, of course, there's this. The US trained the same Islamists who joined ISIS at a secret Jordan base back in 2012. So some of these very same insurgents were trained by the US, who of course armed and funded to a certain degree, many of the extremist factions in Syria that later defected to become part of ISIS. So then we return to the video itself, and some are asking the question, why are governments such as the British government so insistent that the public doesn't see this video, to the point where they actually threaten people with being charged under the Terrorism Act if they do watch this footage? And again, we have a history of staged war provocations. It would be completely amiss and illogical not to ask questions about this video. And let's not forget that several years ago, an InfoWars listener actually faked his own beheading video, which fooled the mass media at the time. This was a while ago now, but they actually reported it as if it was a real beheading when it was completely staged. And if you've seen some of my previous videos, I constantly attack the absolutist conspiracy theorist crowd who insist that every event is staged using crisis actors, etc., etc. The Woolwich attack in London, I made a video saying that that was a real event, it really happened, there were dozens of eyewitnesses, it was genuine. Sandy Hook, I've made comments about that. A lot of people on the internet, on YouTube, think that that incident never happened, that it was staged using crisis actors. Again, I completely rejected that. I don't buy into that meme, that conspiracy absolutism, that every single geopolitical or domestic event that has major implications is staged. I never buy into that. But after watching this video, and again, it's your choice to go and find it on the internet and watch it if you want to risk being labelled a terrorist by the British government. So I'm not encouraging anyone to watch it, that's your choice, it's up to you. But having watched this video as a journalist, there are some major issues. And again, I'm not going to play the video. But if you do watch the video, the statement read out by James Foley before he's allegedly beheaded is read out in such a calm and composed manner. It seems impossible that this man knows he's about to be killed in the most brutal way imaginable. If I was in that position, knowing that I was about to have my head cut off, I would not even be able to talk. Never mind read out this statement in such a calm, composed, collected way, which he did. His behaviour suggests he didn't know he was about to be killed. Now, whether that's because the beheading never happened, or because they just fooled him into reading out a statement claiming, it was a hostage video, and that he wasn't aware of the fact that he was about to be decapitated, I don't know. But listen to his voice beforehand. It doesn't seem like the voice or the behaviour of a man who's about to be brutally murdered. And of course this differs from previous genuine beheading videos, and that it basically seems like it's these two individuals, maybe someone behind the camera, and that's it. Go and watch the other beheading videos if you can really stomach it, or read the reports. There are often crowds of at least 6 to 12 other jihadists around when these gruesome scenes take place. They read out tracts from the Quran, they speak in religious terms, they chant Allah Akbar before the slaughter takes place, both in assassinations, gunshot to the head, or beheadings. There's a militant Islamic element, and there's the chants of Allah Akbar, which you just do not see in this video. That's how it differs from the ones that we can confirm are genuine assassinations, executions, and beheadings. And of course, a major point to make is the fact that you don't actually see the beheading. There's no video footage of this beheading taking place. What you see is this individual begin to apparently cut the throat of James Foley, and then the video cuts to a still image of his supposedly decapitated head resting on his body on the ground. There are literally just a handful of frames right at the end of the video where you see him begin to cut his throat, and really no obvious sign of blood. So this is not really a beheading video to begin with, because you do not see him being beheaded. Furthermore, Foley offers no resistance whatsoever to being beheaded, so that kind of belies the explanation that he didn't know he was about to be decapitated, and that's the reason why he was so calm during his statement. He offers no struggle whatsoever when the beheading begins to take place. Another point, ISIS, as we've seen over the past several months, is a completely brutal organisation, slaughtered hundreds of thousands across the region in cold blood. Absolutely brutal. So why would they leave out the video footage of the actual beheading of James Foley if they wanted, as apparently is their motive here, to shock the world? Why would the most militant and brutal organisation since Al-Qaeda, in fact Al-Qaeda members have said that it puts them to shame in terms of sheer brutality, why would they cut out the actual beheading of James Foley? Because the video cuts out as soon as the beheading begins. Then you just see a still image of the body. Why would ISIS cut it out of the actual video if their intention was to shock the world? So I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I mean, there are numerous other videos out there already that analyse the actual footage. There are claims of blood packets being released right as the beheading starts to take place in an effort to fake the blood. At the moment, it's all speculation. I don't know anything about that. It's interesting. But we have to remind the viewers, this is not insensitive. Of course, it's a horrible situation, and our thoughts go out to the family. But we have to ask questions about such monumental examples of propaganda, whether they be real or contrived, because we're just too long in the tooth. We've seen so many examples in the past of stage events, staged videos, staged beheadings, Iraqi babies thrown out of incubators, which never happened. So many staged events to justify wars, and this is the latest, so it would be remiss to ask questions about it. We're not trying to be insensitive. The whole situation with ISIS is dreadful, it's horrible. Hundreds of thousands have died. But this video of an American journalist and a British jihadist, to be honest, it stinks to high heaven, and I've only just begun asking some of the questions that surround it. And then you dig into the history of, the US's biggest allies are funding ISIS. The US trained many of its members in 2012. Now this is the big poster child for an expansion of war and a possible re-emergence of the plan to attack Syria, which of course was derailed last year as a result of the chemical weapons hoax being exposed as not possibly being the work of the Assad government, and in all likelihood it was launched by the rebels. MIT study later found that it was impossible that Assad could have launched the attack. So this is not to be insensitive, this is not to be callous. It's simply to ask questions about extremely important events as they're presented to us with extremely strong militant media narratives which grease the skids for more bloodshed in the Middle East. We'll continue to look into this. Subscribe to the channel, watch the other videos, and remember to keep up to date with all the breaking news at Infowars.com. I'm Paul Joseph Watson.